Welcome to After Creations Art and Review. I'm Jen, your artist and fangirl, here to share my love of cult films, movies, television, music, and books with you. This week, I'll be reviewing Season 1 and 2 of Stranger Things. I will follow up this video with a full review of Season 3 separately. Stranger Things is a Netflix original series created by the Duffer Brothers. It premiered July of 2016. Stranger Things has an 8.9 out of 10 on IMDb, a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 9 out of 10 on TV.com. The show stars Winona Ryder, David Harbour, Joe Keery, Millie Bobby Brown, Finn Wolfhard, Gaten Mazzarato, Caleb McLaughlin, Noah Schnapp, Natalia Dreyer, Charlie Heaton, and Matthew Modine. Season 2 features new characters played by Dacre Montgomery and Sadie Sink. The series is set in the 1980s in the fictional town of Hawkins, Indiana. The first season is set in 1983, and the second season is set in October of 1984. The first season focuses on the strange disappearance of Will Byers and the appearance of Eleven, a girl with psychokinetic abilities. Eleven befriends Will's friend group and helps to aid in their search for Will. Each episode is set up in the form of chapters, so I'll be referring to them in chapter form for each season. Season 1, Chapter 1, The Vanishing of Will Byers. We are introduced to the main characters Will, Dustin, Mike, and Lucas as they play Dungeons and Dragons. A creature and a young girl known as Eleven escapes from Hawkins' lab, and Will is taken by the creature on his way home. Eleven seeks out shelter and food at Benny's diner, and Benny is killed by an agent of Hawkins' lab that was posing as a social worker he had called for help. Eleven demonstrates psychokinetic abilities, escapes the agent, and comes across Will's friend group that was out searching for him. This was a fantastic introduction to the show, and I was instantly immersed in the 1980s nostalgia and throwback vibe of the episode. The mystery and intrigue is automatically engaging, and the viewer is immersed in the world. Chapter 2, The Weirdo on Maple Street. Mike offers Eleven shelter in his family rec room / basement, where she shows the boys her powers, and they hope she can help them find Will. Nancy is Mike's older sister, and she is dating the cool guy, Steve Harrington, much to the chagrin of her friend, Barb. Nancy and Barb goes to Steve's house for a party. While Nancy and Steve go upstairs, Barb is attacked by the creature. This episode sets up the stakes of the series and shows what a threat the creature, aka the Demogorgon, is to the people of Hawkins. Worry and paranoia spread with the strange sightings and the disappearances of Barb and Will. All I have to say about this episode is justice for Barb. Chapter 3, Holly Jolly. Barb is trapped in a decaying pool in the alternate reality known as the Upside Down. She is attacked by the creature again with gut-wrenching effect. Will's mom, Joyce, is understandably distraught by the disappearance of her son, and the strange electrical currents in her home convince her that Will is somehow there. So she strings up Christmas lights in a Ouija board-esque fashion to communicate with him. The townspeople, including the local authorities, Chief Hopper, think she is losing her mind. Will tells Joyce to run as the creature tries to break through the walls, further cementing her belief that her son is stuck in some kind of alternate realm, but is still in the house. Joyce is the first one to figure this whole thing out. Eleven of the boys go in search of Will, and she leads them back to Will's house. But unfortunately, they don't understand that he's caught in the Upside Down, so they don't believe her and in frustration ride back home, only to find Will's supposed body floating in the quarry being recovered by the state troopers, not the Hawkins police. Chapter 4, The Body. This episode pays homage to Stephen King's short story, The Body, which was later adapted into film and turned into Stand By Me, which is an amazing film. If you haven't watched it and you love Stranger Things, please do yourself a favor and go watch it. I also recommend watching Jaws, Poltergeist, The Ghostbusters, and of course, The Goonies. If you love the throwback style of Stranger Things, but you're not quite sure of all the references that are alluded to, go ahead and give those movies a watch. They're very entertaining, and it will improve your understanding of the series. Alright, off that tangent, back to chapter 4, the body. Joyce is convinced that the body in the river isn't Will, and her suspicions are confirmed by Hopper when he breaks into the morgue to find the body is actually a stuffed dummy. 11 gets a makeover and goes with boys to school to try to communicate with Will in the Upside Down. She makes one of the bullies of the boys pee himself, which was awesome, and Nancy and Will's brother Jonathan team up to find the creature and help Barb. Chapter 5, the flea and the acrobat. We get a lot of insight into the world of the Upside Down, and the creature is now referred to by the kids as the Demogorgon. Their teacher, Mr. Clark, explains the concept of tears in space and time and the disruption of electromagnetic fields as an indicator of these tears. The kids then use their compasses to try to find the tear, but are thwarted by 11, who is trying to protect them from finding the tear and entering the Upside Down, because she is aware of the danger that lurks there. Chapter 6, The Monster. Hopper and Joyce find out the truth about the experiments in Hawkins' lab. They find 11's mother, Terry Ives, and learn that she was part of the MK Ultra project for mind expansion and experimentation. Nancy finds an entrance to the Upside Down and is chased by the Demogorgon. Jonathan finds her and pulls her out of the portal, saving her from the Demogorgon. The boys are ambushed by the bullies, and they force Mike to jump off the cliff to a certain death. But 11 intervenes just in the nick of time and saves Mike and kicks the bullies' asses with her psychokinetic abilities. 11 tells the boys about her connection to the Upside Down and the Demogorgon. She admits that she was forced to open the rift. Lucas split off from the group in search of the tear on his own and reaches Hawkins' lab only to find the agents are heading for Mike's house. Chapter 7, The Bathtub. 11 flips a freaking van in the air in an awesome ET-esque escape from the lab agents. The group hides out. Jonathan and Steve get into a fight. Thus far, Steve has been portrayed as the stereotypical 80s jerk, but his character gets further development as he tries to right his wrongs from previous episodes. Hopper, Joyce, Nancy, Jonathan, and the kids finally all come together and build a sort of sensory deprivation tank so 11 can contact Will and Barb. She finds Barb's corpse and confirms that Will is alive. Hopper and Joyce break into Hawkins' lab, and Nancy and Jonathan go to his house to kill the Demogorgon. Chapter 8, The Upside Down. Hopper makes a deal with Dr. Brennan so he can go through the portal and find Will. Joyce and Hopper enter the Upside Down to retrieve Will, while Nancy and Jonathan lure the Demogorgon into a trap. Their plans are interrupted by Steve, who went to Jonathan's house to apologize for his behavior. Steve freaks out a bit, but ends up helping Nancy and Jonathan fight the Demogorgon. Brennan and his agents descend upon Hawkins Middle School in search of 11. She dispatches most of the agents, and the Demogorgon arrives and kills the rest. The Demogorgon finds the boys and a very exhausted 11, and she is forced to fight even though her powers are exhausted. She reduces the creature to ash, but vanishes along with it. The season concludes with a prologue during Christmas time, and we see that Mike is still hoping for 11's return. The boys are back together playing D&D, the Byers family is happily celebrating the holiday, and Nancy and Steve are back together, with Steve having made amends with Jonathan. Hopper is shown entering the woods leaving Eggo waffles for 11, and we are off for season 2. Overall, I adored this season. It paid homage to many of my favorite films, and subverted many 80s tropes in surprising fashion. The characters were multi-layered and interesting. The message of friendship and family played through each episode. The design of the Upside Down and the Demogorgon was something out of a 1980s body horror nightmare, and the soundtrack would bring a smile to any John Carpenter fan. Stranger Things 2, Chapter 1, Mad Max. In this season opener, we see the aftermath of the events of the previous season play out. It takes place in October of 1984. We are introduced to a new character, #GirlGoals Max, and her brother Billy, who had the best intro of any character thus far in the series. Max and Billy are from California. Max is freaking awesome. She's great at video games and rides around on a Madrid skateboard. She's witty, capable, and Lucas and Dustin are instantly smitten with her, while Mike, who has become moody this season, resents her presence in the group. Billy's character is the obvious human antagonist of the season, playing to all the negative stereotypes of 1980s films. He's sadistic and has a more dangerous edge. His character reminds me of any villain Kiefer Sutherland character from the 1980s. And that's not an insult to Dacre. He did a great job, and I very much like his intensity, and he has that kind kind of wild card character about him. Although I'm kind of thinking he's a racist by the way he treats Lucas in this season, so I'm not exactly a Team Billy kind of fan, but hopefully in the next season maybe his character will get more development and maybe he'll prove not to be such a racist. Who knows? Also, Will is plagued by visions of the Upside Down, and a new monster, which is later referred to as the Mind Flayer, is introduced. We meet Dr. Owen, played by Paul Reiser, who is treating Will at Hawkins' lab. You might recognize him from the Aliens movie. Joyce has a new boyfriend, Bob, played by John Astin of The Goonies. Later in the episode, we learn that Hopper is harboring 11, and he's a big Jim Croce fan. Chapter 2, Trick or Treat Freak. It's Halloween in Hawkins, and we see the boys dress up as the Ghostbusters, only to find the rest of the school didn't dress up. This was one of my personal middle school nightmares. I love dressing up for Halloween, and was heartbroken when most of the kids my age stopped dressing up at school. So I feel for the boys in this episode. Hopper investigates pumpkin vandalism at local pumpkin patches, but there is more to the rotting pumpkins than meets the eye. Will has another vision of the gigantic Mind Flayer, and actually catches the outline of it on camera. After trick-or-treating, Dustin finds a strange creature in the garbage. Nancy and Steve get in a fight at the Halloween party, and Jonathan drives her home. Steve is challenged by Billy, creating new conflict for his character this season. Chapter 3, The Pollywog. There's a flashback sequence of 11 surviving in the woods and Hopper finding her. Dustin feeds a 3 musketeers to the creature he found and names it Dart, keeping it as a pet. He brings it to school because he believes he's found a new species, but Will recognizes it as a slug that he spit out into the drain from the Upside Down. Later in the episode, Will confronts the Mind Flayer, and the creature turns into a stream of ash and possesses him. Chapter 4, Will the Wise. Will talks to Joyce about his connection to the Mind Flayer. Hopper searches for answers and finds the Upside Down is spreading under the town of Hawkins, which is why the pumpkin patches in the surrounding area is rotting away and dying. Finally, justice for Barb. Nancy and Jonathan team up to expose Hawkins' lab. They get Dr. Owens on tape admitting the lab's fault over Barb's death, and they go on a road trip to expose the truth. Chapter 5, Dig Dug. Nancy and Jonathan go to the conspiracy theorist Murray with their evidence and come up with a plan to expose Hawkins, suggesting a chemical leak was at fault for the death of Barb rather than the opening of some portal that she got sucked into and then eaten by a creature. The chemical leak is a little more plausible, thus more believable to the general public. Dart grows and ends up eating Dustin's cat. Desperate for help and unable to find his friends, Dustin asks Steve to help him find Dart, and the two have the most engaging conversation of the series. They develop kind of a bromance, which I absolutely love. The two characters play off each other very well. Steve has quickly become my favorite character of the series, and he's one hell of a babysitter. Hopper gets trapped in the Upside Down tunnels, and Bob uses Will's map of the tunnels to find him. 11 finds her mom and discovers the truth about what Brennan did to her, and learns there is another girl like her. Chapter 6, The Spy. The Mind Flayer takes control over Will, creating a trap at Hawkins' lab. Steve and the kids set up a trap for Dart at the junkyard, only to find that there is more than one Demodog, and the kids are ambushed. Steve is awesome in the episode and proves his mettle as a protector of the children. Chapter 7, The Lost Sister, features Collie, aka Number 8. She has mind control abilities and refers to 11 as her sister. Collie and her punk rock crew are out for revenge on Brennan and the complicit employees of Hawkins' lab and the MK Ultra project. They deck out 11 in some 1980s punker threads, and she goes on a side mission with them, only to realize she needs to return home to Hawkins. This episode was fairly controversial given the cliffhanger ending to the last episode, so fans were kind of annoyed by this one, but I thought it was okay and it was an interesting side story. Even if it wasn't entirely necessary for the season, I would like to see what happens to the other numbers. What about, 1 through 10? So I'm kind of curious to see what those characters are about, although I don't think they needed to dedicate an entire episode each of the numbers. Chapter 8, The Mind Flayer. Hawkins' lab is put on lockdown as the Demodogs attack. This is a super tense episode. Bob volunteers to reset the computers and allow the group to escape the lab. He is successful, but is tragically killed in front of Joyce by a Demodog as he reaches the exit. This part of the episode was a punch to the gut, and all I can say is justice for Bob. The group reunite at the Byers' house and hatch a plan to free Will from the Mind Flayer's grip. The group tie up the possessed Will, and he manages to send them a message, close the gate. 11 returns, again just in the nick of time to stop the Demodog's attack, and she reunites with Mike. Chapter 9, The Gate. The group plans to force the Mind Flayer out of Will, and Hopper and Eleven go to close the gate. Billy is physically and mentally abused by his father, and he is emulating his father's abusive and dangerous behavior. Billy beats Steve to a pulp, but is stopped by Max, who sedates him and threatens him with Steve's bat. The kids take an unconscious Steve to the tunnels to try to divert the Demodogs from attacking Eleven and Hopper. Nancy, Jonathan, and Joyce force the Mind Flayer out of Will Exorcist style, and are eventually successful. Steve and the kids' diversion is momentarily successful, but once Eleven begins to close the gate, the Demodogs rush for Hawkins' lab. Hopper shoots the Demodogs as Eleven faces the Mind Flayer and closes the gate. The episode picks up a few months later. Hawkins' lab is closed, and Barb's family is able to lay her to rest. Dr. Owens turns out to be an okay guy and helps Hopper get a forged birth certificate for Eleven. The season ends with a Yule Ball. Steve drops off Dustin, and Nancy and Jonathan are now a couple. Max and Lucas kiss, and so does Mike and Eleven. Will even gets a dance, and Dustin dances with Nancy, while Joyce and Hopper share a cigarette outside. The scene then turns upside down as the Mind Flayer looms over the upside down version of Hawkins Middle School. The second season was great. I love the introduction of Bob and Max. I was sad that Billy turned out to be nothing more than the human antagonist. I could have done without an entire episode with Collie, but I appreciate her punk aesthetic. She was a cool and strong, capable character. We also got to see the damage done by Dr. Brennan through Collie. Not all of the experimental patients from MK Ultra deal with their pain the same way. Some act violently and are filled with rage, while others seek vengeance. Tell me in the comment section below, what are your favorite episodes from season 1 and 2? My favorite episodes are Chapter 6, The Monster from season 1, and I was happy to see all the kids come together in friendship at the end. From season 2, my favorite episode was Chapter 2, Trick or Treat Freak. I loved the fun 1980s Halloween vibe, and I really liked getting to know the character of Max. Please like and subscribe for more content like this. As always, thank you for watching. I'm Jen, and let's keep it spooky, friends.